Hello and welcome to Two Mutables in a Pod. This is a podcast exploring all things taboo through the lens of spirituality, astrology and bloody life experience. For all of you who are well versed in astrology, this is all the good stuff in the 8th house. My name is Bibi.
My name is Emily.
And we are your hosts.
Hello and welcome to episode 8. Today's topic is all about understanding the timing of your life. It is a term in adult life that encompasses many aspects of our day-to-day life. And in a world that benefits from us chasing milestones, for some of us, it is hard to feel that spark or continue forward when there are delays, detours, and reroutes in your journey. And whilst present-day discourse in wider society touches on this, a lot more honest, frank conversations are needed in the Black, African and Caribbean community. In this episode, Mimi and I will be sharing our personal experiences and insights as we journey through today's discussion to unpack what it means to understand the timing and season of our lives, which is a topic that is very real and raw for the both of us, and we hope to make it to the end of this episode without tears.
So this episode, we're doing a bit of a question and answer kind of style, which Emily has had the greatest wisdom to set up. So the first question, Emily, what does it even mean to understand the timing or season of your life?
I believe, and this is just my personal opinion, I think to understand the timing of a life is to understand that you will go through seasons in your life. Seasons in which you might be stripped away from everything which you were familiar, comfortable, and, safe with. And then you might also go through seasons in which you might reap the rewards, the fruits of your labors. But to strip it down to its basic essence is to understand your own individual rhythm as we journey through this life. Now, it might not look like the timelines, I guess you can say pressures that are placed on us once we reach certain ages, once we reach certain milestones. In understanding the timing of your own life, you might go through periods where you see peers, friends, families journey through different experiences, but it's understanding that you're in a particular season of your life. And that's why, when I was thinking of this question, it took me back to days where I was part of a group study. And, one thing about me, I love religious studies, and I do see the Bible as a book of parables, but also a book of life lessons. And I would like to take our listeners through this short scripture, not too lengthy, but it actually talks about what it means to understand the timing of your life. And so if you've got a Bible to hand or if you've got Google to hand, please feel free to head to Ecclesiastes or chapter 3, and I'm going to start from verse 1. And the title literally states a time for everything. So as you can understand, going back to when I first spoke about this, it's understanding that you will journey through different timelines, milestones in your own human experience, just not at the rate at which your peers might go through or your family members might expect you to journey through. And I'm reading the amplified version because I like how the scripture, particularly for learning purposes and just understanding what the messages are saying, really breaks that down in an analytical way. So it states, verse 1, there is a season, a time appointed for everything, and a time for delight, an event or purpose under heaven. Now, if you don't believe in this, that's fine, but I'm coming more from a theoretical perspective and not imposing anything here, just a disclaimer. It then goes on to say in verse 2, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. And, as you go through the scriptures, there's just various ways in which there is a time for everything. And for me, the wider term of this really looks at our life, our path, our destiny, our journey through the human experience and how we reach different pinpoints. I'm going to use the word pinpoints till we get through, the bulk of our discussion, in which they might look different to other people that we might know, but then, you might actually find your soul tribe who journey through similar experiences. And I think for me, that really encompasses the term and the definition. And going back to that verse really hit home that there really is a season and a time for everything under the sun. So, yes, I hope that answers that question. And I'd like to reflect that question back to you, Mimi, to find out what you feel on a personal level, what it means to understand the timing of your life.
I don't know, girl. Like, I feel like I wasn't expecting like the first few minutes of you talking to get emotional.
Oh my gosh.
Like, just hearing that. So there's two parts, right? I just really have to reflect this back to you.
Yeah.
The first, when I started welling up was actually when you said about finding your soul tribe, and you actually might be going through similar things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you might be in a similar season type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized actually that I feel like you're a part of that for me,
Oh my gosh.
because not only have you been there and like you supported me in quite a heavy dense season,
Mm-hmm.
but you can relate because there's flavors of it where it's similar, but
Yes.
we're just like, do you know what I mean? Like on
Yes.
slightly different ends, but I don't know, there's just this point where we meet, and I was like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my gosh, I feel emotional thinking about that, because you're so right. You do find your soul tribe in seasons, whether it's the high season or low season. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I really just wanted to reflect that back. And I'd never heard of that verse in that way before. And you had, when I asked you the question, something that I was thinking was on a societal level. I know we're going to
Mm-hmm.
go on to it.
Yes.
We often hear about, oh, it's the timing of your life, it's just the season that you're in, more so when it's a darker or a heavier season.
Mm-hmm.
I never really hear people talking about the happy times being a season or a timing of your life, or when you're in a joyous kind of season. It
Yeah.
always seems to be like that reminder when you're going through the depths of a dark night of the soul type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that verse was a real reminder that actually every single part of your life is part of a season, and they all kind of need acknowledgement in the same or equal measure.
Yes.
So that really just, ooh,
Oh God. Oh.
you got me, and it's not even 10 minutes yet.
Oh, as you were speaking, I just felt so emotional. If there was ever a way for us to, blast out our personal conversations, you would understand like the depths of what we speak about. And you are right. You are my soul family. You are a sister to me. I find that, experiences, although they might look different, we meet in the middle, as you've just said. And I
Yeah.
think the way in which we, connected and then the journey in which we're going through, I find,
Mm,
and for astrology lovers out there, it's really cool that Mimi is a Leo rising, and I literally follow after her in the zodiac wheel because I'm a Virgo rising. And I just found that I think it was the month of March, but I was like, no, Mimi, I'm so like fascinated, but also weirded out at how like you might journey through a season in life. And it's almost as if like, what you are experiencing and what you're going through, as you mentioned, people tend to reference this term for the darker seasons. But even when we look at some of the more happier, the joyous aspects of your life, whether that's past tense, present tense, future tense, I think it's so cool how that like there's a follow on, there's a continuation in that story, and that's where I do believe we meet in the middle. So yes, I really love that point. And then the scripture, honestly, when I was thinking about this topic, it just blasted back out at me. And then I was like, no, man, as you've mentioned, we never really hear about the seasons of your life where there is joy, celebration, reaping the fruits of your own labor. And I think it's also very important to understand there is a time under the sun for everything. So yeah, I love it. Oh,
mm,
yeah.
definitely. Just a yeah. I think for me, like when I think about the timing of your life and understanding what it is, I think
Hmm.
I know I speak about this way too much, but it really requires you to be like cognizant and present in the moment to even understand where you're at. And I think that it requires a level of emotional connectivity to self,
Hmm.
to know that actually what's going on internally, externally might not last forever, or we can extend it and amplify it if that's what we kind of choose, but also if that's what's chosen for us. So
Hmm.
when I think about the timing of our life, I think it's about being able to reflect, to see what's around us, to see what's within us,
Mm-hmm.
and know that yes, it may be there, but it might not be there forever. And I know that kind of speaks to more the darker, the heavier times of things. But
Mm-hmm.
also, I think we might come onto this in a different way. I find that in my life, certain things are more prominent in a season, and then other things take a bit of a back seat. For example, the season that I'm in right now,
Mm-hmm.
what's at the forefront is my career, my stability, my security. What's at the back seat is relationships, intimate relationships. And that's not really a present thing for me. And I think just having that understanding allows me to recognize that there is a timing, there is a season in life. Yeah,
Wow.
that's my
Wow. I don't know if you heard me like gasping. And as you just spoke, I just saw the flash. You mentioned Korea in
mm,
terms of that season of your life. And the houses really just jumped at me. We are still are going through the Saturn in Pisces transit. And that really is focusing and amplifying those career houses for yourself. So when you mentioned that, I said, whoa. But
mhm.
yeah, I mean, girl, Mimi's gonna take us to church today because hey, she's gonna preach to us. So I think just as you were speaking, there was so much that my spirit felt. But yes, I'm gonna let you continue.
Yeah, it's wild. But I guess, like, do you think timing is fixed in any way?
I personally believe that time is relative. It is subjective to our own individual human experiences. I think that, you might have two individuals, for example, one being that person who feels like time is constantly on the go. And then for another person, they feel like time is at standstill. It's moving extremely slow. I don't think it's necessarily fixed, although that's what we are taught in
Yeah.
wider society. I do believe that it's relative and it's subjective.
Mm. Do you think that there's like any influence of, like, when it comes to like milestones and timelines of life, or points of comparison? Do you think there's any influence from like the wider society or culture when it comes to time?
Yes, I 1,000% believe that society, wider society, and I want to even the words consumerism come up for me.
Mm.
Um, I think there is a role that, media, mass media, I want to say even, I don't know the words pop culture, but pop culture, mass media, consumerism play a role in furthering timelines, pressures, reaching societal goals. People are typically looked down upon if they haven't reached a particular goal or haven't acquired a particular thing at a certain age milestone. It's typically frowned upon. People are quick to be like, so what will you be doing with your whole life? Like, why have you not got X, Y, and Z pinned down together? Even when we think about the garbage in and garbage out system, which I will refer to this as the mass the mass recruitment of heading people to universities. We go through the system from young, sorry, where we go to nursery, we go to primary school, we go to, secondary school, we then go to college typically or sixth form, and then we are taught that we must become these ideal workers.
Mhm.
If you don't get into university as a whole, and I'm talking about our generation, Mimi, it's typically frowned upon. Why didn't you go to university? It's often pushed down our throats. I went to university later, and that
Mhm.
automatically, I know we are going to talk about Saturn's influence later on, but that
Mhm.
automatically sets me aside as being that black sheep. I think
Mhm.
oftentimes there is a narrative that's pushed that, you must do this by this age, by 18, you must go here. And then I think all of these things do accumulate and add to the societal pressure, hence why we've got people that are suffering from real depression, real anxiety.
Mhm.
And we have
Mhm.
high functioning individuals who you would never even think are depressed. I do believe that these pressures, these timelines, and these, uh, I want to say milestones, they are endless. They never end. It's just a continual loop. So for me, yes, I do think, to summarize this without getting very theoretical, I think, yes, society plays a big role and
Mhm.
consumerism does. So yeah, I don't know about yourself. What do you think? Like, does it resonate? Do you believe differently? Mm-hmm.
No, no, I'm so with you on that. Like,
Yeah.
I'm on the same, same page, same line, like
Yeah.
next word under you type of thing. Like, I'm right there with you because it is the constant one thing after the other with milestones. And you made me realize that once you reach one milestone, the expectation for you to progress onto the other is already like they're chasing you.
Yes.
And it does come from the wider society. It does come from um, media, consumerism, and
Mm-hmm.
the hyper consumerism of seeing, rather than living and existing in our lives. But I think there's also a role that like familial culture can play into that, and the way that you were raised, or the cultural heritage that you're brought up through.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think time is relative, but one of the things I will say about time, as in a personal frustration of mine, is that we don't know. You will never know the timing of your life. And it goes so against what these milestones and timelines are, because we can't see our timeline, is my personal belief. We might be the same age as someone, but might have completely different timelines that have been prescribed to us, or that we have agreed to. But yet
Mm-hmm.
we'll look at the next person and be like, hang on, why is that person over here when I'm over there?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We literally can't see it. And that's how, for me, I'm like, no, timeline, it can't be fixed. The relativity part is that it's so variable between individuals. And I even think, it's not to overcomplicate it, but I think, how I was talking about, there's different parts of my life that can be at the forefront and
Yes.
at the back seat. I think even in different seasons of your life, the timeline can change. So I'll give a funny example. I had an almost 7-year relationship. We had, done the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
bought a house together, and that took the span of 7 years. But then I had a later relationship, and I was with that person for 3 years, and then we had a child together. three
Mm-hmm.
years versus 7 years, you would think surely she would have had the child within the 7-year relationship, but
Yeah.
that wasn't in the timing of that life. Do you know what I mean? I can't explain it. In my head, I'm like, it makes sense.
No, oh, I'm in awe. Like, actually, from you, the 7 year versus the 3 year comparison, and like, as you were speaking, I just thought revolving doors. Like, as you mentioned, depending on what season you are, the timing really does change. But I really
Mm,
loved one point that you made. Well, I loved all the points. The point about culture, familiar culture, particularly if you come from a Black, African, or even Caribbean background. I think the family
mm,
pressures. Oh my
mm.
gosh, you touched base on that, and I completely forgot that. Flew over my head, but that's a real thing, and I
It is.
so real. And I just think like what you mentioned about this. No, I'm still in. Sorry, guys, give me a moment to gather myself. But I think the 7 year, as you mentioned, you moved in together, you got a house. Like that's a very big commitment. It just took you being in a 3 year relationship for you to able to bring forth a child, and that just
Mm.
shows how drastically different the timing of life can be depending on what season you're in.
Yeah, massively. And we had a conversation about this recently, how like you might meet someone like intimately, romantically, and you might automatically know that that person's the love of your life, and then 6 months you're like married,
Yes.
because your souls know each other, and like you're so just like you're just reconnecting in this lifetime. And that is like, to me, that's like point and proof of like
Hmm.
timeline cannot be fixed.
Yes.
It's just, yeah, it's just so variable. Do you mind me asking you though,
Yes.
on the family thing,
Yes.
do you think you had any like familial milestones and timeline or expectations placed on you? And if so, what were they, if you want to share?
Oh, familial. I mean, yes, I come from an African household, so I'm speaking from that lens, and I do identify as being Black African, maturing in the household. I don't. I'm gonna go deep here. So please embrace and sit tight. I think for me, having to I don't think in an African household, and it goes back to patriarchy. I do think these systems, more specifically African cultures, uphold these things. But no one explained to me how I would have to really domesticate myself from such a young age. And I think that expectation to be that individual who will wake up and just clean and then wake up and serve the family needs. And to be honest, my background, I love all the theologies, and sociology is one of my loves. And the division of labor is never equal in the Black African
Mm,
household. And I
mm,
think that pressure to constantly, because it is your energy, it is your physical labor, it is your mental, emotional labor that you're pouring into, making food, cleaning the dishes, washing up, sweeping, all of these things. That expectation was set upon me before I even understood what those things were. Sorry, are you here, Fred?
I am like the domestic labor
Yeah,
part just really made me pause because I didn't even think of that, but it is an expectation that's
Asian.
placed.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And you're judged if you fall
Yeah.
below that standard. You're almost judged. And in my own personal experience, I'm quite the rebellious type. And I think that where I've often tried to advocate for myself, these systems, modalities, and ways of being in our societies as Black Africans don't allow for that. It's typically frowned upon. You are, I want to say, dehumanized to the point where you're not even seen as a woman. You're seen less than a woman if you choose not to follow those norms, those, standards, or adhere and uphold these, I do think, very patriarchal values. Because, in my household, I never saw, the men that live in this household doing the very same things that were expected from me. And I think also, just talking about this, I just think about the experience of the boy child versus the girl child. Like, our paths are completely different. And like from birth, there are different expectations. So that's one that really stood out to me the most as you asked that question. But I'm also intrigued to find out for yourself where that stands for you from a family aspect or perspective.
Yeah. Do you know, I took that massive pause because I was really taken out because my mind was like doing acrobatics because I I just made the jump from when you're domesticated from basically birth as a female child growing up in an African household.
Hmm.
What that is they're rearing you to become wife and mother, right?
Yeah.
But yet at the same time, I'm not saying this was your experience growing up,
Hmm.
but at the same time, there's no talk about what it is to or how to have an intimate relationship with a man, or if that's what you choose,
Hmm.
how to date, whether dating something that's welcomed. It's almost like a jump between you're domesticated and then you get married. But what about the in between? Like, are we open to dating? Are you
Yeah.
like okay for me to have a boyfriend? No, we
Mm.
just do the jump. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense.
You have, you are really taking us there. And I think for a lot of us, including myself, there was never that, and that's another expectation.
Mm,
Relationships, intimate partnerships is
yeah,
something that, the saying like see and hear no evil is something that we know exists, but we never had no discussions about that. But it's an expectation that we just do not get involved in. But then, as you
right.
mentioned, we are supposed to be the mothers, the wives, the
Yeah.
partners that, support and nurture these connections that we might go into in the future. But there is that expectation that's almost shunned upon, that the girl child will never speak about those intimate relationships in the household.
Mm-hmm.
It's so strange because, as you said, you then are expected to turn up to be this almost perfect wife or mother, but you've never been equipped with the tools to do so.
No, I definitely agree. I think for me,
Hmm.
the expectation or timeline is not going to come as a surprise to you. It was all about education. And it was you go, you do the thing, you go to high school, sixth form,
Hmm.
university, then you come back and you get your master's.
Hmm.
Like, I don't think I've ever told you this story, but I lived, once I graduated at 21, I was then living up north for a couple of years, and then I moved back home with my mum. And I moved back home. She allowed me home because I said I was going to do my master's. And she was like, "Yeah, you can come home as long as you do your masters." I never did that masters, but that was the thing for her. That the
Yeah.
timeline for her was go and get the highest level of education. Not that masters is the highest. She would want me to go beyond
Beyond
that.
that.
Yeah, if I had a PhD, she'd be laughing. Um, but yeah, the expectation was to follow that timeline. And for her, it was the higher the education, the more money you can get.
Mm.
It was very much the undertone of that is what you do and that's what we value. Everything else is non-existent. Don't want to hear it in this household. Don't want to see it in this household. Doesn't exist.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah.
And do you know what? I just want to ask you if you feel comfortable enough, and if you don't, because I completely understand it's very real and it's very raw. But I think coming from a background where that pressure to achieve academically was placed on you, now you know you are a, you are a jack of trades. You have many qualifications under your belt and vocational ones
Mm,
at that too. How did
mm.
you make that transition to follow the beat and the rhythm of your own path? Outside of mainstream academics, because you are quite learned. I'm all outside of this pod. I'm often in awe as to how many qualifications and like accreditations Mimi has. So how did you follow that path, particularly where there's been that pressure to follow a particular path? Yeah.
Gosh, that's such a hard question. Um, because you know what? How? The
Hmm.
how is because I did the thing that was expected of me and I was miserable. I
Hmm.
was so unhappy with the path that I chose. Um, and I just couldn't understand why I had allowed someone to railroad what I felt in my spirit, that I just became quite indignant about it. And I was just like, well, I did the thing. I'm not happy. I'm going to do my thing now. Fuck it.
Wow. Okay. Hmm.
And even though I had that attitude, it did and it still does take me a lot of like work to, how do I explain it? Like I sometimes still feel like I'm the one in the room with all the qualifications that's not being seen in the room for her experience. And
Yeah.
sometimes there's still that I need to go and get more. I need to go and do more in a traditional sense, even though I've got, like he says, vocational and
Hmm.
other qualifications that are equally as valid. That voice in the back of my head still tells me, I mean, I was looking at it yesterday
Oh
to
my
go and do a
God.
master. Like
Yeah.
the voice is still there. So it's not easy. There's so much enjoyment that comes from the other stuff that I have done and continue to do. Yeah.
That's very deep because as we the question was, how has society slash family, which I loved how you include that family aspect, that played a role in furthering pressure, timelines, and deadlines. And I think despite it being years down the line, that voice still rings in your mind and your soul, really. And I think the very fact that people don't understand the implications of them trying
Mm.
to set a blueprint for your life. If you go ahead and do the masters, fine. Maybe that's your own obligation. You were deciding to go ahead and do that. But I can't seem to separate that voice of authority that was imposed on you, which made you believe that you needed to conform and still not see the wealth of abundance of qualifications that you do have, which make you sometimes question whether you even have enough. And I think, as we journey through today's discussion, we're going to actually see that, what? In life there has to be a point in which, and how you mentioned, you did the path that was said for you to do, and that path made you miserable. You had to follow the own rhythm, and sometimes that rhythm might look like you questioning yourself and thinking, am I valid enough, am I good enough, am I worth enough? I'm not saying these are the things that you thought, but for you it's really deep for me to see, and I admire how much you have achieved. And the the cost is not cheap. Let it be known, guys. The cost is not cheap, and for there still to be this inner void at some times, really, really hits home about the pressures that come with timelines, deadlines, and aspirations and goals that have been projected onto you. Yeah.
Emily, that's like a whole word. Because if you, yeah, like if you end up listening to that external pressure, you
Mhm.
end up following somebody else's timeline, and then you're sitting there questioning, why am I not progressing? Why is my life not unfolding? But yet you're not even on your own timeline. That's that. Like when you were saying that, that's what I was hearing. I was like,
Oh my gosh.
this is a whole message.
Yo, guys,
Mm,
that's deep.
deep. It is deep. Um, but yeah, just thinking and expanding.
Mhm.
What seasons do you think a person may encounter, or what experiences might they have as we journey through life, or as they journey through life?
I love this question because an array of things, and I think, you know what, you mentioned we rarely hear about the happier or the more positive seasons. So I feel like
Mm,
starting with those, you might journey through a season in which, experience and go through that transition into motherhood. I think that is a very big season, and I'm making this specific to the community that we belong to. Um, I think it's celebrated, but it's more celebrated in the sense of, okay, yes, you can wear and you can bring life forth, but it's not celebrated as to the blossoming that occurs, whether that's the ups and the downs. But I think motherhood as a whole and that transition from,
mm,
yeah, being a woman and then being that nurturer, I think is a season in itself. I think people might go through a season. I want to brand this as relationships. Now, I'm going to focus on the more positive sense before I, expand onto the more dark night of the soul. But you might go through a season of celebration where that could be, you entering marriages, having that engagement. It is a big transition. You are essentially saying you're merging souls with somebody and you are becoming one. I
mm,
think that in itself, your whole life and identity to some extent does change. You go through being from Miss to Mrs., your legal documents change and so forth. That's a whole season, embracing that, what that means to be a wife on your own terms. I think that's something that, again, in our culture, well, yes, culturally it is celebrated. If I look more so at the Southern African lens, even in different parts of Africa, it is celebrated. You have the whole lobola, bride price, you've got the traditional ceremonies, but I think the lessons, the blossoming, the transition, I don't really think is living in the diaspora anyway. It's spoken about enough in our community, should I say. I think people now are coming out to, share their experiences, share how that transition has played out for them. And I'm talking in the positive sense, not the negative. But I think it's more so our generation that's sparking those conversations around that. I think people might go through seasons in which, they really are reaping the rewards of their labor. But that could look like the desires, perhaps for one individual. It could mean being able to be that travel blogger. Why do I feel like I'm talking to myself? And securing those deals, securing partnerships, securing collaborations, things seem to come through with a bit more ease.
mm,
You might be
mm,
going through an identity of finding out who you are, reckoning with your roots and understanding your heritage. That might be a season of understanding. And I think it's a celebration in itself. One thing that I often say to Mimi is that we are people who love the culture. You can't separate culture from us. And I think here in the diaspora, some parts of our traditions have been lost. Obviously, again, some people simply might not just practice them. But I think when you rediscover your roots and rediscover who you are from both paternal or maternal lenses, or even just on the individual spectrums, I think there's so much reckoning that happens with the soul that is to be celebrated. So I think I'll stop there in regards to some of the happier seasons and perhaps look more so at some of the more the soul evolving seasons that you might go through. For
mm.
example,
Sorry, I just had to say I really love that term, soul evolving seasons.
oh my gosh,
Beautiful.
thank you, thank
Mm,
you. You might go through a season, whether that's through partnerships, romantic, um, friendships, family. I think, partnerships as a whole, in which you are brought to the, as Mimi loves to say, your knees. You're brought to the depths of your knees. And that means a literal stripping away of the Guys, I'm sorry. I can't not be plutonic here when I speak about these things. And, if you are listening in and you're an astrology lover, um, I've gone through my fair share of plutonic experiences, but I also believe that Mimi has a lot of plutonic energy in her natal chart too. So this is energy that she is not a stranger to. Um, and when I say being brought to your knees, I mean a literal burning away. Now, that burning away could be very visceral. That pain could be very visceral. Um, but it is a stripping away, a removal. And as you go through the fire, and this is just the imagery that's coming through mine, I have an image of a person walking through that fire. Now, it burns for sure. You are going to feel in every aspect that transformation is recurring in. But I almost see these wings blossoming through. And that to me is the renewal that, yes, you go through that period where you are shedding away, you are stripping and burning. The burning can burn your soul to the ground, but you come out on the other end with the lessons, the wings. That's why I see the wings. There's this like solar light energy that transforms and comes through. And when I think about scorpionic energy, the scorpion stings, right? And that might be the season which you might need to focus on your partnerships. But there could also be a season in your life where you are experiencing loss. I'm going to make this a bit more personal. The season, and I think Mimi is going to chime in too, to this, but for myself, where I'm currently at, I do believe that I have been going through for the past 2 to 3 years a season of delays. Now, the delays I understand, as Mimi has mentioned, that once you get to grips with understanding the time of your life, you realize that yes, cool, the delay is a delay. There's things that come along with it that are very, very frustrating and annoying, but you understand the bigger picture of why it's happening. But I think the season of actually waiting, the setbacks, when I thought about this topic, I came up with this topic from a place of pain because I was sitting in my room and I was just like, how long am I going to be waiting? Like, I'm gonna get emotional about this topic because it's very raw and very real. But in that season where you are going through the closed doors, like the doors don't feel like they're opening at all. Um, it can send you to the brink of oblivion. When I mean the intrusive thoughts to the point where you are questioning your existence, that is a real thing. And I know we're going to journey through that a bit deeper as we go through this episode. But I think I can't talk about this without talking about the experience of having to wait. And even if you are a firm believer with all the faith in the world, you cannot deny how testing this season can be for the soul. And the reason why I title these soul evolutions is because you don't come out without your soul evolving in one shape, form, or the other. You are going to have the wisdom, the insight, and the knowledge. But first, as I mentioned, you have to go through the process of rebirth and being stripped away. So I'm also going to pass this question on to Mimi and actually ask her what that means for her in terms of the seasons, the themes, the experiences that one might encounter as they journey through life.
Mm, just such a it's a big question, but I
Yes.
really have to thank you and applaud you, for like being very frank and saying it's 2 to 3 years of delays, because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we can think that these timelines are or should be a couple of weeks or maybe a few months. But no, sometimes it can be years.
Mm-hmm.
And to go through years, and we've been going through this alongside each other and before we even knew each other,
Yes.
um, because it's been about the same time frame. And I
Mm-hmm.
think sometimes people don't necessarily know, or it's not always visible what someone might be going through
Mm-hmm.
while they're in the biggest season, delayed season of their life. Because 2 to 3 years is a long time, and along the way you have to or you end up kind of trying to salvage what you do have, and that's where people might not necessarily see how hard it is for you because you're just trying to get through to the next day. And
Wow.
it's a lot. It's a lot. So I really have to commend you for referencing exactly how long it's been to make people understand that, yeah, it can be a lengthy period. It's no walk in the park, my friend.
Well, I am speechless, like how you have like honed into that, but also drop so many gems at the same time. Like, I don't feel like this is like, I know we are recording, but I feel like this is a conversation between our souls right now because
Mm,
I'm just like, yeah, you have said it that I guess maybe this is like back to the mass media, because media does clock onto cycles and they understand that wellness,
mhm,
mental health, and holistic health is where it's at right now. So don't
yeah.
get it twisted. You're gonna see like big brands trying to promote these things, but they never really tell you the entire truth. They tend to like
True.
glamorize it, should I say?
Mm,
But
massively.
you can't glamorize the wait of 2 to 3 years, and some people have been waiting even longer. And as you said, people tend not to see, especially when you're a high functioning individual. As you mentioned, Mimi,
Mm,
you're salvaging the bits and the bobs, trying to glue the bigger piece. It's like missing pieces of the puzzle. You're trying to salvage a
mm,
puzzle to make it whole again. But it's like people aren't seeing the behind the scenes. And as you've mentioned, we pretty much, with the way our astrological charts are set up, I find it so cool how we journey through the cycles of the zodiac houses, but our stories meet in the middle. And that's
yeah.
why I feel like whenever you're speaking, you're taking me back because you're speaking to my soul. Like my
Mm,
soul and my spirit needed to hear that. So, yeah,
mm.
thank you.
No, likewise for you. I actually don't think there's anything I would add to like the types of seasons that we may encounter because
Mhm.
you explained it very well. But what I would kind of add, maybe this is more of a personal thing,
Mhm.
is for someone such as myself who has eighth house placements in the whole sign system, something that I recognize within me, because one of the first examples you gave was about becoming a mother.
Yes.
And I'm a mum to a 2-year-old boy, and that was absolutely and is absolutely one of the best seasons I've had in my whole entire life.
Oh my
Being,
gosh.
I mean, he's pretty cool.
He is. He
He's a cool kid. But then the other side of it, and I do attribute this to my eighth house, is that whenever there's something joyous, I do think of the other side. So that birth and that death can be
Mm-hmm.
quite literal for me.
Wow.
And I always see or think or experience both the joy and the pain simultaneously.
Oh my gosh.
So like becoming a
Mm.
mother was like the ultimate thing. It's the thing that I always desired when I was a little girl. Never wanted
Mhm.
to get married, never had
Yeah.
dreams of like white picket fence, but what I did know was I would be a mother. So that was like a very big thing for me. But then
Mhm.
the process of getting pregnant,
Mhm.
the whole relationship that I was in, the breakdown of that relationship, the intrusive thoughts that I was having about being a mum, and then all of a sudden you're like projected into worry and fear and thinking about loss because you've got this new literal life with you.
Mhm.
And like even now, like when I'm in the car, like I'm constantly like thinking, oh my God, like what if like we're like written off in the car or something? And like it's a joyous season, but other aspects or other thoughts might come in that aren't so
Okay.
joyous.
Yes.
So, whilst you're in a particular season of your life, it's not uncommon to feel the opposite or to be aware of the opposite,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
I like the fact that you are highlighting that you can simultaneously experience both.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Exactly that.
Wow. I mean, I'm really interested, and I think also because I just love how you share the wisdom and it flows through you so naturally. But I would really like to ask you, and more so from a reflection perspective, about your own journey through the seasons that you have experienced, be it past tense, present tense, and what some of these seasons have taught you about understanding the timing of your own life.
Mm. Do you know what?
Hmm.
I'm going to talk about a health season.
Okay.
So, I'm going to talk about health season because I think it relates to something else. But for the most part, I feel like I have been a healthy person
Yeah.
outside of my menstrual cycle, and that being the time when I've experienced chronic and debilitating pain. But when I became a mum, after I gave birth, I noticed my immune system was just completely shot. And for context, I've been vegan for now, I think 6 years. And whilst being plant-based, I never ever got ill. I was always so healthy. And then I became a mum, and then my health was absolutely in the toilet.
Hmm.
But in the last year or so, let's say like the last 9 months, there was just this period of time where every other week I was constantly unwell with something, and so was my son.
Hmm.
And it was like we were just constantly ping ponging illnesses back to one another. But it was never like the same illness. It would be like an ear infection, or then a cold, and then sickness and diarrhea. And it was just like all sorts of things.
Hmm.
And it was frustrating me. And I was feeling and thinking like, why do you keep making me unwell, me speaking to my guides? Because I have this inherent belief that if your body is making you sick, if you're getting sick outside of like serious illness, your guides are getting you to slow down, and they're trying to slow you down so that they can communicate something to you.
Hmm.
Because ordinarily in day-to-day life, you're too busy, you're on the hustle, you're on the go. Whereas when we are unwell, that's our opportunity to rest. So I kept thinking, like, what is this about? Like, I don't understand. And it was a very frustrating season for me because I just wanted to be active and I wanted to be doing stuff.
Yes.
And this then led into when Mars went retrograde, I think in Leo first, then in Cancer, then it kind of ping ponged between the two. So whilst I was physically unwell, I then started to get spiritually and mentally and emotionally tired, because for me, Cancer and Leo are my 12th house and first house.
Hmm.
So I was just drained. I wasn't sleeping well. I was just like completely on the floor. And then I had to really down tools and assess what my capacity for business, life,
Hmm.
mothering, work was. And I thought at that point I understood what the season was, but I didn't. It then led into a lot of transitional things happening through work, where I was then like not working for a period of time. And that's when I really was like, oh, it's because my ancestors needed to stop me because I was just going guns blazing, pursuing a path that maybe wasn't for me. So, whilst it started off as like a physical illness,
Yes.
and I'm still kind of on the tail end of this, it kind of like manifested into a no, we need to get you onto your path. We need to bring you closer back to home because all of this that you're doing is fun, is great, is whatever. But is this actually what you want? Is this actually what you signed up for? I don't know what I would call that season. It's present and it's
Yeah.
historic,
Hmm.
but I think it's an example of how a season can evolve, as you said, with the evolution.
Yeah.
But I think if I had listened or stopped and actually genuinely paused earlier, maybe things might have been different. I might not have had to have the whole company that I was working for shut down in order for me to reassess and like get a bit more action going, I guess. I don't know if that was even clear because it's not got an outcome. Well, it kind of does a little bit because
Mm.
what it has taught me so many things actually. Because whilst it led into like a job situation, what
Hmm.
happened was that I ended up moving to two companies. One where I'd be paid £5 more per client, and another where I'd be paid weekly. So there was a literal change in a no, you're working for less than what we want you to be working for. You need to get out of there. There was that. And the other thing was I had to start considering my worth and what I wanted to show the world what my worth was and that the value and what I was projecting out into the world,
Mm-hmm.
because it really made me think about alternative career options and what my minimum expectation would be for myself, as in to receive.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So it was, yeah, I learned a lot about, still learning.
I am taken. Yeah. Like, I can't even lie to you from
Mm,
when you were speaking, but the literal, if you had slowed down a bit before, would it have taken the whole shutting down of the organization and company you worked for to
mhm,
occur in order for you to, see and hear the messages that you need? And we spoke about the intuition in
yeah,
episode 7, and you mentioned that presence is a big thing, and you also brought it up today in this conversation because it's very true. In order for you to understand the season and the timing of your life, you need to
mhm,
some extent be present. Not even to some extent, you just need to be. And I think
mhm,
the very fact that you've mentioned this, but then you've also tied this in with the fact that I've got 2 gigs going,
mhm,
one that's paying me £5 more and one that's paying me weekly which is, I do think that's, and how you mentioned your value and being valued in the spaces that you're contributing to, but also being acknowledged for your worth. And I'm always going to say, resource, and Mimi, we have this conversation oftentimes. Resource gives you freedom. Like, nothing, nobody can ever underplay the importance of resource, and having that weekly income, having that £5 extra also
mhm,
allows for, yeah, freedom to occur. And I'm not saying this is you're gonna be the next Richard Branson. God, yes, I do want that for my friend. But I'm saying that right now, for where you are in the season of your life, I
mhm,
think that that is such a key importance that, like, I don't even. I'm still spinning off what you said about the whole organization having to shut down for
yeah,
you to, uh, yeah. Sorry,
yeah.
guys. Oh,
It's
yeah.
insane. And you're right, because we did speak about intuition in episode 7,
Mhm,
and there were moments throughout, like returning to work from maternity, there were moments where I was like, am I in love with this job anymore? Like, and I was questioning and I kept thinking about moving,
mhm,
but I didn't follow through.
mm.
I didn't think about the potentials for being an independent. No, sorry, I did think about the potentials of being an independent provider
Yes.
and the potential of how can I do this but get more money. It had been a
Mm,
thought, but I kind of suppressed it or pushed it away because I was only being present for moments rather than prolonged presence. And that prolonged presence was forced upon me because I didn't create the space to be present for long enough. I was just doing it like in little dribs and drabs.
drips and drabs.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. I mean, yeah. Sorry, guys. I am, and I know that the next question that I'm about to ask Mimi is really going to, yeah, I know she's going to take me off the Richter scale. But I think here, like, tying that into episode 7 and
Mm,
you acknowledging that, what? Your spirit was already giving you those signs and signals. But I feel that as part of understanding the timing in your season of your life, I think you had to journey through this transition for you to get to the space of acknowledging and knowing that no, your value and your time, because as I say, you are somebody, and this is not me just bigging up my friend because she's my friend, but she's somebody who puts her heart and soul into everything that she does. It's never surface level. And I
mm,
think, even in our private conversations, I just know that this is not just like a paycheck for you. Yes, cool, resources a thing. Everyone needs to be paid the time and the energy and the money that they deserve for what they're bringing forth. But this is an energy exchange that is intrinsic to who you are. And I
Mhm.
think one thing that I found out quite early on in this conversation is that you mentioned something, and I don't know if this is your cat moon, which we're going to talk about a bit later on, but you said like the work that you do makes you feel whole.
Mhm.
And I think you don't really hear that oftentimes from, and I don't want to, I'm not judging the whole spiritual sector or the holistic wellness industry, but there's typically this drive to drive sales, sales, sales. And you've often said that's not your modus operandi, that you don't operate from that space. You do not feel comfortable about that. And
Mhm.
even, I'm just going to say, I don't know if Mimi's still offering this, but I had a year ahead reading with Mimi, and I cannot, and I'm not saying this because, and I don't know why this is coming from the spirit, but it's coming. When I say that it was in depth, guys. In till this day, I go back and refer like that is my guide for the month. I'm not gonna lie, that is my guiding. That's my compass, my literal navigation tool for the month ahead. And if oftentimes everything that had been put in the PDF, because I like to read things, and I got a written format PDF after my face to face reading. I sit back and I often say to me, I was like, nah, man, you're on the money. And I know that life will be happening to her, but I have to let her know that she was on the money. So for you to actually go through this whole process, which was painful, I think it was a literal stripping away for an organization, a company that you've worked for 4 years to shut down, and then you're left like at a standstill. I think for you to hear that message very clearly, but also follow through with the other things that your spirit, your guide, your ancestors have been, I guess, in some ways trying to show you. I can have utmost respect for that. And that's why I'm like, and to even hear that you're going to a space that is, I'm all for Black women being paid the coins that they deserve because they put
Mhm.
their body, spirits, and soul into the work they do. So,
Mhm.
yes, I am going to talk about, we live in a capitalistic society. I am going to talk about money. I'm going to talk about resource because I believe that you should be paid for that and paid your worth. So I'm
Mhm.
happy. I'm happy to hear this. But yeah, I won't
Thank
ramble on too
you.
much about that.
Thank you. What about you and your journey? What seasons have you experienced? And
Do you know
what do
what?
they teach you?
I I really like as my mind is blank because I'm so centered on this, and I also just want to. I really just want us to focus on. I mean, it probably will come to me later on. I can't even. Mimi, I'm taken aback by what you were saying here. So I would like
Okay.
us to, yeah, we're going to use Mimi's example as that. And hopefully when we talk about the feelings, thoughts, and emotions, things will come back up for me. But what I also wanted to ask you, following on from this, was what are some of the emotions, the thoughts, the feelings that you've experienced as you journey through the seasons of your own life and observing the timing of your life too?
Mm. Frustration is
Yeah.
a big thing. And
Mhm.
I actually think that's part of my human design when I'm out of alignment is that I feel frustration. Um, yeah, it's
Yeah.
funny how it's all
I
interconnected.
know.
But yeah, the frustration is like a big thing for me because it's like this feeling immobilized and I don't like to feel like I can't move. Like it's part
Hmm.
of like my whole Saturn energy where I just don't like to feel restricted. And for some people, that might sound a bit like counterintuitive, but my personal belief is that people who have Saturn energy, they want to restrict what's around them. They need to have like structure and order as long as it makes sense to them. But to have it on them, as in imposed on them, that's when it can feel like we can't breathe. So it can feel very like literally like there's a noose
Hmm.
around my neck, like when I go through like seasons like that, or when I had gone through a season like that. But I would also say somebody asked me this question years ago, um, and it my response always plays in my mind. I think they asked me about like if I ever get angry, and I was like, no. Why would I be angry?
Hmm.
Like I just don't experience anger. It's not a thing. And I remember saying that at the time, and then life showed me I can get angry after I kind of like said that. I think even I said to you yesterday, I think I
Yeah.
said rage or anger. no explanation, just rage. But that is
Hmm.
like this season has taught me how to connect to my anger and how to connect to my rage, because some of this stuff does make you angry.
Hmm.
And it's just this whole, like, where can I let this out type of thing? How
Hmm.
can I let this out? So yeah, I would say those are the emotions, yeah, that
Wow.
have come up: anger and frustration.
Do you know what? The rage is making me laugh because I just remember when you said it yesterday and it's still so fresh. But I really resonate with those emotions because typically, again, I'm not saying we are definitely not love and light people. We are going to let you know that if we're having a hell of a shitty time, excuse my French, you're going to know. And I think
Yeah.
it's also very important, especially as African women, Black women, for us, like we often are stereotyped as being these angry,
Mm,
confrontational people. But anger is, I'm not going to lie, is one of our superpowers because you're not going to take advantage of us. And I've seen this, like the rage that we feel as a collective, as people. And I think outside of us, being Black women, just women as general, like you will find women marching the streets, protesting for abortion rights, fertility rights, femicide. There's so much anger I think it's a spiritual tool that for Black women is weaponized a lot. And I think
mm,
that's to obviously make us docile and make us just conformist. But no, I think rage, frustration, anger is part of the human experience. And it shows that you actually are human. Because if you were happy 24/7, there's something that's not right there. You're obviously concealing something, going back to the high function depression. Like it's not right. And I think for myself, just echoing off those kind of feelings and emotions that have come up for me, I can't
mm,
lie. Depression. I mean, in my natal chart, I like I think it was last year and this year that it really stood out to me strong. But I am somebody who goes through bouts and seasons of depression. And I think it was very amplified during the seasons of stagnation for me. I
mm,
can be very jovial. And I think that's down to, my Gemini stellium, my Sag placements, but I think when I'm going through it, there is no middle ground. I just disconnect. And I
mm,
found that throughout these seasons, I have been sad. Like, I'm somebody, I do struggle with letting and releasing tears and emotions, but I can honestly say that I will be in my room thinking, what is actually good? There's a pain that feels like you can feel it in your throat, that it's like, nah, man, is this really what I signed up for? And obviously, I know that my purpose and even Mimi's purpose is greater and far bigger. And I'm not even just trying to big us up here, but the reason why we're going through these seasons and why else we're going through these soul evolutions is to prepare us for where we are well headed, our final destination point, which is our paths, our destinies. But I have often come up with feelings of just feeling left behind. I won't even lie to you. I think a lot of it because I'm edging towards 30 and it's my, funny enough, my birthday's around the corner. This is the least optimistic I've ever felt about a birthday in my life because I don't feel like
mm,
there's anything to celebrate. I'm even struggling. I've been putting plans. People have been asking me, what are you doing? Like, what's happening? We need to know. And I have been struggling since, I'm going to say since March, like, but even beyond March. And it's not me. I know this is not me. And this is why when I thought about this topic, I was like, you know what? Discussion on this needs to happen because I think if you're somebody who is, like Mimi said, is able to salvage the pieces, so you might not appear as if you are going through it, please let it be known that behind the scenes they are going through it. And I think we are quite vocal about our experiences. I often write about pain, sadness, people tend to think I'm quite melancholic. I just think that I like talking about these things because it's a release. It's not my identity, but I understand that through these seasons, I needed a release. Like Mimi mentioned, where's the anger going? And the release for me was through speaking to people who are in my soul tribe, journeying through similar things, also writing, also listening to music. But I can't take it. There's a sadness that, like, I don't, it's so deep that I felt. And I almost feel, who was the other person that felt this way? Was it Van Gogh or was it Albert Einstein that felt this like, was it yeah, him. I can honestly resonate with that. It's, you can't shake it off. Don't get me wrong, there are times where, in the seasons where I'm not going through or the planets aren't applying pressure on my angles or my placements, I can breathe a bit. I have been feeling like I can now breathe. I feel a bit more optimism, but let it be known from about 2022 till present, I have been going through cycles of cyclic sadness, cyclic depression, and I want to say also anxiety, like worrying about what is the future gonna look like. These are all valid. Like it loops in from the anger, the rage, the frustration to the sadness, the depression, the anxiety. It all is very interwoven, and that's why I think it's all multidisciplinary. Like we can't look at this just from one lens. It all interconnects, and that's why I love like when you said the rage yesterday, I resonated because I'm sick and tired of not having resources. It's a very angry, frustrating feeling. But
Yeah.
I think that's perhaps maybe my mutable energy as well. I'm just going to summarize this by saying this last point. Um, I love traveling. Like I love
Yeah.
being able to travel. And boy, oh boy, has that been brought to a standstill. Like the only time I get to see planes is when I'm looking outside my window. Don't get me wrong. I've had to make use with what I can. So, I've actually began exploring parts of the UK because I'm like, if I can't actually fly out, at least let me explore places that I can actually get to. And it's been a humbling experience. Like I have felt I felt very undeserving in those moments because I'm like something that I used to be able to do off the back so frequently. How the hell have I been brought to a standstill point about this? But it just goes to show, like, as Mimi said, like the seasons of your life and the timing of your life is very dual in nature. You can simultaneously be having a very great time, and there have been moments in these seasons where I've had good times, but then I've also been hit with moments of absolute lowness. So, the dual nature of these seasons and this timing is very real.
Yeah. It's so real, and I just, it really kind of actually made me tear up. How many times does Mimi say that? But it made me tear up when you were saying that for you it's actually quite hard for you to like cry
Mhm.
about these things. And I know why from your chart, and I know we've spoken about it.
Yeah.
I love that you said, you have written about quite sad or emotional things, but that
Hmm.
has been a form of an outlet for you. So I'm wondering if or how you maintain faith in those seasons, or like your practices or routines. Like how do you find the willpower to keep on keeping on?
What a question. Oh my gosh.
Mm,
You know what? And I'm going to keep this as honest and frank as possible. There are moments in which I don't have the willpower. I will not light a candle. I will not even, I cannot pick up any form of religious text or holy text or text that resonate with me. There are moments in which I I I'm stumbling because I'm like, you can just say it might as well not be existent in my life in those moments. I struggle to connect when I am actually going through it. Now, there will be moments where I'm randomly sitting there, whether that's through a dream, whether that's through a message in my, waking sense, where I feel the spark to at least, you know, I'm terrible with steaming when I'm going through it.
mm,
And me have often spoken about road openers, things to do, to open paths. And there might be times where it just comes to my spirit where I'm like, fine, I'm going to actually listen. But then there are moments, and let it be known, the moments have been extended, very long at times, where I can't connect. But even when I want to pray, like I might just sit there and I say to God, I say to the Creator, I say to my guides, I say to ancestors that I don't actually have the words. Like, you just need to search my heart because at this point, I can't say it. Like, I think it was last week, I went to my local park that's got a bit of a hill. And I was just like, you know what, guys? I'm here because I'm on my knees, but I don't, you need to see what I'm going through. Like, I can't say it. And I've been putting that off for a very long time. I think when it comes to being in the midst of a heavy season, I do find that I push off spiritual practices. I know some people will say that's bad, but I'm sorry, that's just, I don't have the capacity for it. But when I have had the capacity, it will just be on a random day when I least expect it. The spark will come to me and I will feel that call to write. And writing is something that me and Mimi both love and share. It's a shared interest. It's a way for us to express ourselves. And I found that like when I'm just not there, I can't write. Like I there's no way that I can churn out the content and write because it's not flowing from me. I'm an intuitive writer. So it might just hit me on a in an evening where I just feel the need to write and I will follow that impulse. But sometimes it's a bit harder for me to hear that. But one thing I will say is that I've been getting into the habit of even when I don't necessarily feel like it, I will try and pull a card for myself. Um,
Mm.
which has been a very interesting thing because I didn't grow up doing these things. It's something that I'm figuring out and, finding the beat to my own rhythm with it. But I find that when I do that, it's like a message that I'm like, whoa, okay, guys. And I use Oracle cards to pull my cards for myself. But when I do that, I'm like, oh, you're speaking to me in this way? And that might just be the one thing I do. Or I might listen to a song that might speak to deliver messages through music. And I find that these are the ways that when I am going through it and I don't have the willpower, they're small things that I try and do, but they lead me to that path. So yeah, I don't know about yourself, and I don't know if that resonated as I was
Yeah.
speaking. Yeah.
Yeah, completely. I actually do the same thing. I pull a tarot card every week, and that's my tarot meditation. I didn't like the card I got this week though, but I think it is very accurate for where I'm at right now. Um, so yeah, I definitely do that, but it is so hard
Yeah.
to maintain your faith and your practices when you're in a season of strife, let's
Oh,
say. It's just I think that's the moment where I'm not at my altar,
yeah.
not lighting the candle as you say.
Hmm.
But what I think I might do a bit more, sometimes it's unintentional, is maybe I'll go out a bit more and I'll walk a bit more. And just the process of being out can sometimes just help. So I think kind of similar in what you were saying. But yeah, being a writer, I think when you go through these moments is very tricky because in one
Hmm.
way it can be your your spark of inspiration, but it can also feel quite hard to get there,
Yeah.
to sit and to write, and it can feel very like you're walking through like treacle, just trying to get there to, write. Um, I don't know. For me, I am, if I'm at that point, like
Hmm.
a real, real low point, I think the only way that you know that I'm at a real point is if I say I actually cried, because if I'm crying, then that's something that's like that's cut me very deeply.
Deeply.
Yeah, because it takes a lot for it to happen. I can cry for someone else if
Hmm.
someone else is going through stuff. Like, how many times did I tear up during this? But when it's stuff for me, it's like, no. So if I'm at that point,
Hmm.
that's when I know, it's going to be a hard climb and up from here to get to my faith again.
Again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the moment where I'll probably speak to someone
Yes.
and just like, this is happening. I don't know what this is, and I'll just kind of vent my frustrations in that way. And I think sometimes that is a way of trying to connect or trying to find faith.
Right. No, I think I really like that point. I
Mm,
really like, I mean, again, not to make this all about, soul drives and like people and our friends, but I think there sometimes is an underrepresentation of the impact of just venting to somebody who can even embrace you and listen and provide a space for you to do so in the first place. And I think,
yeah.
as you were speaking, I just kept thinking about how in media spaces, social media spaces, there is this like drive to continuously show up, show up, show up, show up, show up. But if you don't have the capacity to show up, like, hello, you're not going to be able to. I think you can have all the faith that you want, but if you are actually going through strife, which is what you greatly termed,
Mm,
it's just not going to be possible. And I think the very fact that it's normal to disconnect, it's normal to go through the seasons of life where you just you're confused about what you're connecting to in the first place. Like Mimi said, even being a writer, it's the ups and downs in the journey, which we definitely need to speak about in another episode. But
mm,
that very source of inspiration as to what you're going through might be the very thing that causes you to feel stifled. And I think
yeah.
the point about friends, and this is why I don't take our connection, our sisterhood for granted, because we can vent about literally the most randomest things, most
Mm,
personal things, but
yeah.
let it be known that we're going to soundboard our ideas out to each other. And I think that helps a lot, especially when you don't really have a network per se, or if you don't really have, familial connections that you feel free to go and speak to. I think, yeah, the underestimation of people who are in your corner is a big thing. And I really love the fact that you touched on that.
Yeah, definitely. It's massive. What like transits, like what astrological transits would you say might highlight stagnation in someone's chart, just in case anyone's listening and they think they might be relating to this?
Ooh, girl. Now, it wouldn't be us without us explaining our own personal experiences, right? But off the bat, like, I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. Anything to the angles, but I'm going to be more specific as to things that I've personally experienced,
Yeah,
be it Neptune.
yeah.
Be it good old Saturn. On Twitter, there's been this discourse about Saturn. There's this division. Saturn is this planet that's painful, brings delay, setbacks, and whatever. And then some people talk about, its mastery. It's actually a
Mm,
benefic and not a malefic, which basically means it's a positive planet, and as opposed to it being a negative planet, which is a malefic. And for me, having gone through this personally, I can say, yes, fine, I see the mastery, but let's not take away from the pain and the literal stripping away that it does and
yeah.
it brings about. I also would like to say that if the sun, because I do think the sun also represents our vitality too, if you've got a transit to the sun, let's just say Uranus, which is
Mm,
the wild card, right? It brings both positive and negative experiences to the sun. Let's even say to your money houses, right? Which could be your second, your sixth, I think even your eighth, because that's, resources, whether that's others, shared, inheritance, tax. But I also was thinking about your 11th house as well. If you've got heavy generational planets going through that, and I say the 11th house because those are like our wider ambitions, our dreams, our goals, the things that we really hold near and dear to us, but also the networks that we have amongst other people. Like these are heavy, hard aspects going through those houses. Yeah, I think life is never going to be the same. Now, I speak about the evolution. There is the beauty that comes through that soul's evolution, but let it be known that you can also experience some very painful experiences through that. But I also would like to say Pluto too.
yeah.
Like, can't forget good old Pluto. And I think if Pluto is applying to the first house, is in the seventh house, I think it really shifts that relational house, even being on the ascendant and on the descendant.
Mm,
Yeah, it's going to be a hell of a time. Going back to Saturn, you can have two individuals. I'll take myself. I'm having the delays in feeling seen, career, money, just overall progression in life. But someone might also have Saturn transiting, let's just say their seventh house, because it's in my seventh house too right now. And they are getting married, baby girl. It's different
mm,
experiences for different people, depending on what's going on with your, the whole chart. But that's why I say that for me, when I think about things that might bring about delays, perhaps transits, for example, that might amplify stagnation, I'm definitely going to speak about Neptune. I'm definitely going to speak about Uranus. I'm definitely going to speak about Saturn. And to some extent, I will also speak about Pluto. I don't know if that, where you stand with that, Mimi.
No, I completely agree. It's funny, like when you were talking about Saturn,
Yeah.
I just had this memory of someone who I used to work with years ago,
Hmm.
and they once said to me, you know, you're like this really scary head teacher, but you're also like my cheerleader, and that you're always like doing these like songs and dances and cheering me along.
Hmm.
And just as when you were talking, I was like, that is so Saturn. Like that, she was just seeing Saturn in me. And
Yeah.
that split between the, it can really be painful and really quite scary and dark, but also it is there to teach you, and that it is actually encouraging you. You've
Hmm.
just got to get to the other side to see it, but that's not to take away from how grueling it can be.
Yes.
And I just, that example was just ringing in my head about how Saturn can sometimes present.
The way that you're breaking this down in everyday terms, but with real life experiences that are relatable, I'm just like, yeah, yeah,
Mm,
you're taking me away. Oh, girl, I'm gonna need a moment to recover myself after this recording.
yeah,
I would like
okay.
to then ask, a bit more about your own, I guess, personal opinion, your own hot take on what natal placements may have to work a bit harder than others might in order to understand that the timing of their life isn't necessarily delay or denial.
Yeah. Sorry, Saturn, but we're here again. And I can speak from personal experience having a Capricorn stellium, but also having Aquarius placements,
Yeah.
even though Aquarius has Uranus as its modern ruler. Um, Having Saturn placements is kind of what I was saying a bit earlier.
Hmm.
When you've got that natural Saturn energy within you, I think there's like an expectation of how you think your life should go, and you might have a very, no, but this is my life, I designed it this way, of course it's going to go this way. And sometimes that can be really good because it means you're very confident and very self-assured.
Hmm.
But what happens when it doesn't go that way? I think that's when Saturn people struggle, because they then perceive it as someone's blocking me, God is denying me, why is it delayed? And it can almost become like a really earth shattering process. What else would I say? I think in order to other placements, again, it depends where Uranus is for you.
Hmm.
Like if it's conjunct like a personal planet, I would say, such as like your sun or your moon,
Hmm.
more so moon maybe, but there might be other things like Emily mentioned, the angles as
Hmm.
well. Like if you've got Uranus sitting quite closer to one of your angles, um, which would be first, seventh, fourth, 10th.
Yes, yes, no 10th.
My mind was like trying to like, I was literally like moving my hands around the circle, meaning the houses. If you've got Uranus sitting quite closely there, I think Uranus can make you afraid or fearful of change, because Uranus is the wild card. It does like turn
Hmm.
things and flip things like upside down. It does desire and crave like constant fluidity and change, even though it's a slower moving planet. But I think if you've got it quite close to your angles, it can make you quite fearful of that change, and you might try to predict or control that change in some form, or resist it rather, not control. I'll say resist it. Um, I also think there's like planets that might want to escape change. There's more of like a, oh, I'm just gonna bury my head in the sand. I'm just gonna avoid it.
Hmm.
And I would have to give that to like heavy Neptune or Venus placements, I would say as well, for different reasons. Um, Neptune would be the more I can't cope with this, I don't want to see this,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do or engage in perhaps more maladaptive coping strategies such as sex, drinking, drugs in order to avoid the timing of my life. Whereas Venus placements might be like, but this isn't nice, this isn't pretty, this isn't how my life is supposed to go. I'm just going to reject that. And I'm just going to focus on what feels good, what looks good, what is positive. So a very whimsical type of avoidance, I would say. Yeah. I don't know if that resonates with you or if you have anything to add.
Oh my gosh. I think firstly you took me aback when you said there are Uranus placements, was it? That might be afraid of change. And then you did mention the moon, and I thought, as you were speaking about the moon, I also thought about the MC. Like,
Mm,
even if Pluto's on the MC, Saturn on the MC, Uranus,
true.
but I think also when you then broke down, right, certain placements that might embody these energies, aka Neptunian energy or Venusian energy, I also thought perhaps, right, perhaps, here's my hot take. So could Jupiter also fall into that category? In terms of the ways that you've broken down how they might escape, and thinking about some of the individuals that we've seen in like the public space, like Miley Cyrus and so forth, Tiffany Haddish and all those other things. I also like that was one hot take. My second hot take is typically, right, Scorpio or Plutonic energy is seen to I'm going to say the word naturally embody that healing transformative energy, right?
Mm,
But what happens if sometimes they actually run away from that initially on the onset? Because
mm,
whilst it is an energy that they might naturally, the sign or the element might embody because it's in its natural state, what happens if it makes the native run away from those things in
mm,
order to then come back home to the self? Yes, I don't know
mm.
what you think about those two things.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I could agree. Like when you were saying about Scorpio, I was thinking maybe if someone had a 12th house in Scorpio,
Yes.
um, they might just like want to retreat more so from these kind of deep transformations.
Hmm.
What was the other one you said? Oh, Jupiter, for
Jupiter.
sure. I don't know how I missed that because yeah, Jupiter's my queen of escapism. Um, definitely in all sorts of ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh, not the queen of escapism. Well, I really love that. And thank you for really turning our minds inside out about that. I like how you broke down the ways in which some of these planets or placements might want to escape, which leads me on to, the final segment of today's discussion, which is embrace yourself. What advice can you give to somebody listening into this episode who may also be in the midst of a season that is heavy and taking a toll on their emotional, mental, and spiritual health?
Yeah, big question. I think first you have to acknowledge that it's taking a toll
Hmm.
on your health. I think you have to be willing to be open and honest enough with yourself to realize that. Something that I've had to kind of realize is how much motherhood has taken from my physical health and acknowledge that the physical changes that I've seen just within 2 years.
Hmm.
And it's hard when you can see it, but you're not being honest with yourself about it. So I think you really have to be honest in seeing and acknowledging these things. Secondary, I would say, and this has come very much inspired from what you've been saying, Emily, is know who your soul tribe is and lean on that. I
Hmm.
think there's something within me that has this understanding that the mental health sphere, and I can say this being a mental health professional for nearly 2 decades, is
Yes.
that there's this unspoken culture. I'm going to blame CBT therapy here, cognitive behavioral therapy, There's this unspoken culture that if you're going through something, you must rewire that and you must take responsibility for that solely, because you must be able to heal, or you must be able to find tools to be able to overcome that.
Mm,
And I think that is partially wrong, because I think that messaging can send the signal that the timing of what is happening is my fault. I am at blame, and then that can push you deeper into stagnation.
mm,
Whereas if you're able to understand that actually we as a human species
mhm,
are supposed to be in connection, in harmony, in partnership with other humans, we are supposed to connect and collaborate. I feel like if you're able to bring those principles, you're able to then find your soul tribe, lean on each other, pour into one another,
mhm.
and that's how you end up getting through those seasons. And I think we need to go back to more of that collectivism mindset rather than the individualistic mindset in order to get us through those seasons.
Oh wow, I'm just gonna give you a little clap here. I really love that. I love, and you are very community focused. If you've listened to Mimi now over the past, 8 episodes that we've recorded, you would know that Mimi really does center her practices, her values on community and actually collectivism. We spoke about, consumerism, brands picking
Mhm,
up on, wellness, and there is this drive to promote the individual self of healing, but there
mhm,
really isn't a drive in mass media or like consumerism for collective healing and like ways to collaborate and heal, which
mhm,
really ties into what I was going to actually say following on from that point. Across all religious scriptures, you'll find that comparison is said to be the thief of joy, right? But if you actually are immersing yourself with people who are journeying through life just like yourself, going through the various seasons in their lives, you'll often find more times than not that there are similarities that you're going through certain things together. And although we live in a digital age where people might be focusing on their highs as opposed to their lows, and we don't necessarily see all that goes on beyond the eye, right? I think that finding that soul tribe, having those open conversations, collaborating, even how the Two Mutables and the podcast came about, it was a collaborative effort for a shared vision to discuss the things that are taboo in our communities, but also for our love for healing, wellness, spirituality, that. So I do think that there are ways for us to collaboratively heal and
mhm,
also reduce the comparison because, I think typically jealousy and envy is shunned a lot in religious texts, in religious teachings. But I think if you look and strip away and go to the core of why that person is feeling that, they're not an evil person. They just desire the things that, they feel aren't coming to them or, haven't been part of their timing of their life or their season.
mm,
And I think it only turns into a negative quality or trait, if it's left undealt with. But if you
mhm,
are to unpack that as a collective with people who can support you, I think it's more so. And I do think people typically say this online. Jealousy and envy is actually a form of admiration. It's just the ways in which the person goes about to admire that thing is a whole different conversation. But
yeah,
that's why I go back to the point about comparison and that being the thief of, your joy, your happiness. Once you understand that you are moving through life at your own pace, at your own season, yes, that's not going to stop you from being sad. That's not going to stop you from feeling like you've been left behind, but you acknowledge those feelings. You allow them to come in. You sit with them even though they're difficult. You don't utilize Neptunian or Jupiterian ways of like, band aiding those feelings, emotions that are rising for you. I think you will then often find that you can release those things without the envy and the jealousy, but acknowledge that these are things that you admire and desire and want for your own life. But understand that, one thing I've had to understand, thank God Neptune has left. Well, for now, let me not say this actually, because you mentioned the part about anger. But one thing I've understood through the transit, Neptune's transit along my angles, is the very fact that, you know, you do have to actually apply the work too. Um, and that's one thing that I think in the spiritual community, it isn't necessarily, there is, yes, I understand you can manifest things. Yes, I understand that you can you can utilize spells, magic work, and so forth to bring about desired outcomes, right? Which is what is said online. But I've had to realize after living in 14 years of this Neptune transit that no, you need to put in the work. Like the things you desire can meet you only when you've met them halfway. And that's
Mm-hmm.
part of a message from understanding that I want everyone to know who's listening in that seasons don't last forever. And even if you aren't a religious person or biblical person, whatever text you follow, there definitely will be a scripture similar to Ecclesiastes 3, verses 1 onwards, right? That explains there is a time under the sun for everything. And I think the most important thing to understand is that if you do experience feelings of envy and jealousy, sit with those feelings. Don't automatically shame yourself or guilt yourself or blame yourself for feeling those things or brand yourself as being wicked or evil. You simply desire the things that you're seeing, whether that's online, whether that's because you've heard something from somebody. You obviously have aspirations, you have dreams, and you don't intend to stay stagnant forever. But if you actually put in the work, and when you have the faith to apply the spiritual practices, tools, or routines, do that and show up in that aspect when you can and you have capacity. And also build a network because you can't do this alone. Life was never intended for us to live it alone. I do think that you will go through and pass the seasons. You will understand what it means to journey through your own rhythm and beat of your own imprint. And that's the advice I can give. And yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Mimi.
No, I love that. And I think in some ways, when I was hearing you talk, I'm like, oh God, it would be so beautiful when we're out of this particular season, this cycle, for us to like record something else because
Yes.
as like an extension, oh, I'm sure we'll be in another season at that point. But I just think it would be a beautiful point to reflect. And yeah, I love the message about jealousy, but also non-comparison
Yeah.
because it's yeah, it's a very real thing. You know, you mentioned our peers and things like that
Mhm.
who might be observing and looking to. But yeah, I think that was a beautiful message.
Yay. I really love this episode and I think it's been such a honest,
Mm,
open and frank conversation that's very much needed in our community, but in wider society as a whole. So, without rambling on too much, I would love to thank listeners who have been continually supporting us. And if this is your first time listening to this episode, welcome to the Two Mutables in a Pod podcast. You can listen to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. And please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and also comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts, we'd love to hear your experiences. And we would also love to encourage you to spark these conversations within your own networks, within your own life, and see what comes up for you. See you next time. Bye for now.
bye bye.